Another fun game for the Indiana Pacers and another win. Their second in a row. They beat the Mavs in Dallas 124-122. How did they do it? Who was huge? What's next for this team? And Myles Turner playing maybe the best basketball of his career, all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East, and I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, another win for the Pacers. 2 in a row for the first time in a while. We'll get to tons of random stats about the Pacers win in the third segment today, but it was an impressive win for the Pacers. They go into Dallas. They're playing a good Dallas team, a team that has won some games recently, has been right in the thick of it in every game they've played since the big trade acquiring Kyrie Irving, and they win against a high-quality Mavs team. Maybe the Pacers' most impressive win of the calendar year when you look back through their schedule, and they got it done in a unique way. 124-122, the final score of this one. Although the Pacers tried to not win, we'll get to that as the segment progresses. We'll also talk about Myles Turner in the second segment on today's show, who was awesome in this game and might be playing the best basketball of his career. But not what I wanted to lead with today when looking at this game and the Pacers getting it done. It was a fun day for the Pacers, first and foremost. Tyrese Haliburton's birthday, sort of. His birthday is actually February 29th. This game was the 28th. So kind of his birthday. They celebrated it throughout the day. Benedict Mathurin sang him happy birthday in France. And then they went to Buddy Hield's house for a shoot around. He's got a gym in his house, which was cool. A lot of fun stuff coming out of Pacers content land this day. And then there were really hot and loud rim mics in the Dallas gym. So it was a lot of fun stuff to hear for the Pacers on their way to this big win, which was led by free throws, a new recipe for Pacers success in this game, the foul line. They have not attempted this many free throws in a game all season. They have not attempted 40 free throws in a game all season, but they did in this one. 40 free throw attempts for the Pacers, and that is exactly how you beat the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavs, Maxi Kleber was back for them for the first time in a couple months, but they're devoid of good rim protection, of good guys at staying in front of you and stopping you from getting to the rim. That's a tough combo to have. They have some okay wing stoppers, ex-Pacer Justin Holiday, Reggie Bullock, but they got rid of Dorian Finney-Smith. JaVale McGee hasn't been what they needed. They don't have good defensive pieces to keep teams away from the basket. That's why if you listen to yesterday's game preview podcast with Nick Angstad, we talked about defense struggling for the Mavs. And so the half-court offense for the Pacers would be huge, and it was really good in this game compared to normal, and a big part of it was them attacking the basket and getting to the foul line. 40 free throw attempts for the Pacers, like I said, season high, their first time hitting 40, obviously, if it's a season high, and they hit 31 from the foul line. The Mavs, who have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, two brilliant rim attackers and foul drawers, only took 28. That's still a good amount, but only got to the line for 28. They only hit 18. So the Pacers, against a team with two stars who are good at drawing fouls, good at getting into the paint, made 13 more free throws. And a 2-point win that ended up being huge for the Pacers' prognosis in this game, because they had a couple stretches where, when maybe Haliburton wasn't in there or Turner wasn't on at that particular time, Mathurin didn't have a great night. They needed to get offense in a certain way, and the foul line was their way of doing it. So that was huge for the Pacers. 40 free throw attempts, like I said, season high, which was led by Tyrese Haliburton's 15 free throw attempts. That's a career high for Tyrese Haliburton. 12 was his old career high, so he smoked it. He made 12 of those in the game. Looked like a true star, getting to the basket and getting foul calls in this game. And Buddy Hield had 9 free throw attempts. That ties his career high as well. He got fouled twice on threes early in this game. Another foul drawn, a tech free throw in there as well. So the Mavs were just all over him. It was nuts, to the extent that whoever it was, Bullock, Holiday, a guard, were just all over Buddy Hield. They would not let him get free for shots. He only took 2, although the 2 he got fouled on means he took more than 2. But they were all over him, and he still found a way to be effective. The free throws were a big part of that. He had 10 points on 2 shot attempts. Talk about an efficient outing in terms of using possessions for Buddy Hield. So free throws were how the Pacers got it done. That was the thing they did uniquely in this game, or thing they prioritized in a way that wasn't really something they do all the time. But another thing in this game that was fascinating to me was Tyrese Halliburton's aggression. He always talks about this. Sometimes he feels like when he's really tossing a lot of passes and keeping the offense humming, he almost feels like he's being selfish because he's not hunting his shot, right? He's hurting the team by prioritizing the wrong things. He's very good at reading what the Pacers need, what he needs to do to get an advantage. In this game, that was hunt his shot. I already talked about 15 free throw attempts. That's a career high. He also led the team with 18 shot attempts. You blend those together, you can tell how aggressive he was with the ball, how aggressive he was looking for his own shot. And that's because the Mavs don't have Dorian Finney-Smith anymore. They traded him for Kyrie Irving. That's a smart trade for them, but it also means they have terrible point of attack defense. Even their good defenders are only okay at that. Justin Holiday, Reggie Bullock, the guys I've already said a bunch of times. And Halliburton just torched the Mavs. He was driving to the basket, getting to the rim, getting layups. Eventually, in the fourth quarter, the Mavs kind of figured out what the Sacramento Kings did in Sacramento earlier this season. I'll never forget it. Malik Monk was the first guy who said it. A lot of players this season have talked about, when their team has slowed down Tyrese Halliburton. Something they did well was, they followed the scheme, they communicated well, team defense stuff, all this stuff that's like, yeah, you did that, but like that's not really what the difference was. Malik Monk in Sacramento was just like, we made him go left. He's so much better going right. We made him go left. Even Halliburton himself has said he's way better going right. He prefers to go right. And so the Mavs at the end of this game kind of figured that out and forced Halliburton left, and he put together some dribble package moves to get in the paint, draw some free throws, 2 free throws that ended up sealing, air quotes, because kind of not really, but either way, the game at the end, he was awesome, and his aggression was a huge part of the Pacers getting across the line in this game. They are now 5-4 when he takes 18 or more shots in a game, and 5-2 when he scores 29 or more points. He finished with 32. Just like in Orlando when he was the offensive engine, he was once again. That's what all-stars do. Tyrese Halliburton was truly spectacular in this game. The other thing I want to highlight before we get to Myles Turner today is the defense to close this game by the Pacers. They finally figured it out just in the nick of time. I mean, I could not tell you how bad the Pacers defense was for stretches of this game. Guarding Luka Doncic is nearly impossible. Aaron Nesmith was the only credible option the Pacers have. He even talked about on the broadcast, we can't foul, right? We've got to be physical without fouling. And the Pacers really wanted to keep the Mavs away from three-pointers, right? That was what Lloyd Pierce talked about and his halftime interview on the broadcast, right? They had a defensive plan, but the Mavs offense is so good that it's just impossible to do that. The Mavs still got up 37 threes. They still got to the line almost 30 times. They only turned it over 7 times, right? Their offense is just, it's so good. It's so hard to stop them. They still scored a 122 on what I bet they would consider a pretty off night in terms of foul shooting and three-point shooting and all sorts of other things. So yes, the Pacers had a defensive game plan, but it was not really working all that well. But they had some nice moments. But either way, their offense was always fine. So 121-110. The Pacers are ahead with 6 minutes to go in this game. They just need like 2 more stops, right? You're close to getting it done at that point. You can bleed a ton of clock. You're up double digits, but they couldn't get those stops. And that is when the Pacers offense fell apart there for a second. And the Mavs, in 3 minutes later, after that point, had it to 121-117. It's a close game again. Then they hit another 3 with Reggie Bullock. It's a 1-point game. The Pacers have lost their 10-point lead. It's going to be a 1-possession game for the final 2.5 minutes. Tyrese Halliburton misses a free throw at the 2:13 mark, and it's 122-120. But for the last 2.5 minutes, the Pacers allowed the Mavs to make 0 shots from the field. They figured out their defense just in time to get this game done. Reggie Bullock missed a 3. Kyrie Irving had a layup blocked by Aaron Nesmith. Maxi Kleber missed a 3. Kyrie missed another 3. Tim Hardaway missed a 3. Most of these were contested shots. Luka Doncic gets one of his 2 free throws gets his free throws to go late, and then Kyrie misses his heavily contested 3 at the buzzer. Pacers only scored 2 points in that stretch themselves, but they actually defended well, and a big part of that, beyond them actually locking in and making it happen, was Myles Turner being a deterrent at the rim. The Mavs were scared to shoot around him and over him or whatever because he was fantastic in this game in every single way. And Myles Turner's playing the best basketball of his career. He was fantastic in this game, maybe the best Pacer, despite Tyrese Halliburton's insane evening and Buddy Hield's super efficient night as well. And Myles Turner, perhaps in the best stretch of his entire career right now. Let's talk about that in the second segment with the numbers and details from this game to back it all up. Before we do that, though, got to talk to you guys about FanDuel. We've passed the midway point of the NBA season with the All-Star break being done. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers to threes drained. They have their fun 2x3 bets. Two three-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes of the game. They have player props with points and rebounds, and you can do all sorts of things. And FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. Of course, make Locked On Mavs your second listen. Hear what they have to say about the Mavs, their defense, and their late game execution. Because, yes, they have a bad record with Kyrie and Luka, but a lot of that is not finishing the literal last possession of a lot of games. They'll figure it out. The Mavs guys will explain it all over at Locked On Mavs. Whew, what a game for Myles Turner. Stats don't look amazing, but he was truly incredible in this game. 24 points for Myles Turner. That was the second most on the Pacers. He had 7 rebounds, which was the second most on the Pacers. Weird game on the glass with so many shots going in for both teams. 4 blocks for Turner, looking like his peak form at that. Only 1 turnover, 1 assist, and 1 steal he adds. And he had 24 on 10 for 13 shooting, nearly 80% from the field. Best shooting percentage on the team in this game. And that was all huge, right? The buckets he was scoring were huge. The post buckets over Christian Wood, in particular, were game-changing at times when the Pacers were struggling to find other ways to score. His post moves were fine in this game. We'll talk about that as this segment progresses. But what was really huge is something I talked about at the end of the last segment, and that is the blocks and the rim defense ended up changing the Mavs' offensive shot profile, right? Late in the game, they were driving, and then they'd get towards Myles Turner, and Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic would spray to shooters. And that's a generally good strategy, and they can kind of make good shots that way. But 2 superstars taking a layup, or even a contested layup, generally better than the kick out to the role player. But they wouldn't shoot it. They did not want to shoot near or around Myles Turner. And I'm reminded of the 2019 playoffs when the Celtics and Pacers played, and the Celtics destroyed the Pacers in that series. But Kyrie Irving said it after game 3 in Indiana. He's like, when Turner's in there, man, we play a totally different game. You know, we attack the rim differently, where it's just harder to score around this guy. And it's fitting that it's Kyrie, because in this game, Kyrie, again, would sometimes shake out of those shots and things like that. Turner had a sick block on Luka Doncic, where Luka even said to him, like, during the game, like, dude, you got me. Like, he played a brilliant defensive game, and combined it with 10 for 13 shooting and the boards. It was amazing in this game. The Pacers did everything he could do, and it was the breaking it up of the normal style for him that was big in this game, right? The shooting is his big thing. He only took 2 threes in a 24-point game. He was crushing it on the interior. Maxi Kleba, back from injury, couldn't do enough to slow him down. Christian Wood's defense was terrible. Honestly, Christian Wood in general in this game was miserable. -16 for Wood, far and away the lowest of any player who played. He played terrible post defense on Turner, but Turner punished him, right? Good moves, good fadeaways, and in the lane, Turner was making moves and making the offense hum. He was brilliant down low, and he was perhaps the Pacers' best player, despite maybe Halliburton was better. Those 2 guys were both awesome. They've both been awesome in both games of this road trip. But let's talk about Myles Turner in the year 2023. 2 months now. It's March. I can't believe that. It's been 2 months of 2023. Myles Turner's played in 22 games in this calendar year for the Pacers. He is averaging in those 22 games. This is over a fourth of a full season, by the way. I mean, in the grand scheme of your career, it's a small sample. In the grand scheme of one season, it's a significant sample. In this quarter of a season stretch, in the year 2023, Myles Turner is currently averaging 20.3 points per game, 8.2 rebounds, and 2.6 blocks. He's shooting 55% from the field, 39.6% from deep, and 79.8% from the foul line. Percentage points, decimal points away from a 20 points per game score on 50, 40, 80 splits. That's from a big man who just had 40 points against the Celtics. I put might in my tweet. I'll say it again because I hedge a lot and I'm afraid of forgetting a stretch of a player's career. But this might be the best stretch of Myles Turner's professional basketball career. At the beginning of 2023, he was great when he came back from injury. Around the extension, he was good. Coming out of the break, he's been phenomenal. He's been so good this year for the Pacers. And I think to me, and I put this in my story after the Celtics game, right? He had 40 points. And the story was, of course, he had a career high in points. But the subtext of that story was, it's because he's a varied scorer now, right? Jaylen Brown said, hey, we wanted him to shoot, and he shot, and he killed us. And he also killed us on the inside. And Myles Turner used to just be a shooter most of the time, a perimeter guy. Now, TJ McConnell said it after that game, right? He can venture into the paint more. He's got a more varied approach, and he's punishing teams with that approach. That's what's allowing him to be a 20 points per game scorer. Obviously, good percentage from deep is playing a significant factor in him putting up points. But it's not just that he's making threes. It's that he's doing everything on the floor, and the defense has been just as good. So the first thing I wanted to talk about in this segment about Turner, I mean, I can't believe I said the first thing. I've been avoiding my notes almost. The post moves in this game were killer, and that's been a big part of his growth in the year 2023. And the scoring is the ability for the Pacers to say, oh, you switched? Great, we're going to toss it into this guy, right? And it was not some terrible defenders against the Celtics when he had 40. It was Marcus Smart and Jason Tatum. Christian Wood's not a good defender, but at least he's tall. Myles Turner shot right over him. Maxi Kleber is a good defender. Myles Turner scored on him, right? Guards, of course, he's punishing, getting to the foul line like he did against Boston. He did that a few times in this game. The post-move improvements have been so huge for him and his development, and it literally adds an element to the Pacers offense. It makes switching a harder task for other teams to do. Switching might be the best way to slow Tyrese Halliburton, or it's definitely the best way to slow most of the Pacers ball handlers, but it's a lot harder to do when if you switch a Myles Turner screen, all of a sudden your tiny guard's on him and he can go just walk into the post and score. All of a sudden the pick and roll doesn't matter. The action down low matters. That's made him phenomenal. Also, the defense, just as good as it's been his entire career. I mean, I don't have to explain Myles Turner's defense to you in year 8 of his career. One of the best rim protectors in the NBA. His defensive box plus minus is still great. His offensive stats, obviously, through the roof. He is just phenomenal for this team. And for a team with terrible perimeter defenders most of the time, they really need that. And it's not just the defense, right? It's not just physically him stopping other people. It's the stuff I just talked about with Luka and Kyrie. And obviously it was huge in this game, but it's every game where guys get to the lane and they go, oh, crap, that's Myles Turner, right? And Kyrie Irving is uniquely fitted usually to punish him. He's got a nasty pull-up game. He couldn't do it in this game. He did pretty well. Kyrie played a good game. But, usually that's the type of guy that makes drop coverage hard to do. Myles Turner still played a fantastic game. He is very good at many pick and roll coverages, which is very common in basketball, and he can protect the lane from anywhere. He is so important to the Pacers defense just because of his presence, not even because of the blocks and the rim protection, but because of what it adds in terms of teams kicking out, in terms of guys resetting, all sorts of things. And that's been on display recently, right? I just did a whole segment on Turner because of the Celtics game. I feel like I'm recycling a lot of points, but I have to because he's been so good this year and he's been so good since his extension too, right? You kind of worry, you hear about contract year players, right? And maybe there's something to that, although I've read a lot of data studies that say that's not really a thing, but maybe it's something. Either way, since his extension, right, he has been phenomenal. They've played 10, now 11 games. In the first 10 games since the extension was agreed to, that includes the Memphis game, although technically he hadn't signed it until after the Memphis game, 55, 44, 88 splits, 20.5 points per game, 8.5 rebounds. That's before tonight. So the rebounding number goes down a little bit, but the points go up, the field goal percentage goes up, the three-point percentage goes up from all that. Since the extension, he's been incredible. After the All-Star break, obviously a 40-point game is going to boost some stats. Either way, in that stretch, he's been incredible. And tonight, he put that all together in his hometown with a bunch of family and friends there. He said on the broadcast he was the walk-off interview for this game. He put it all together in a big win. Pacers really needed this one, like a confidence booster, right? They didn't beat the Magic. They didn't beat the Bulls, right? They beat a good team on the road, and Myles Turner was a huge reason why, and he's playing phenomenally in the year 2023. Still over 20 points per game for a whole 2-month stretch. Maybe it's just offense, and I'm putting too much into that and not the defense, but statistically, a lot of ways you can cut this up. Perhaps the best stretch of his entire career. And it helped the Pacers get a huge win. I've got a lot of stats about the Pacers winning this game and the Magic game on this road trip, as well as assessing kind of where the Pacers are. 2 other key games that mattered a ton for the Pacers tonight We have a lot more to get to about this game. To close out today's Locked On Pacers podcast, thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, jump on over to Locked On Spurs. Funny timing because the Pacers played the Spurs in 2 days, but I would have picked the Spurs anyway tonight because they won. They broke their 16-game losing streak. They beat the Jazz just in time to go home and play the Pacers. But congrats to the Spurs. It always has to feel good to break a losing streak that long. San Antonio gets it done in Utah. Good for them. And you'll hear a lot more about the Spurs tomorrow, but I'll get to that later in this segment. What we're talking about now is the I don't even know what to call it. The context of this win, I guess, is the best word to say it for the Pacers because it's just one win. It's just one post All-Star regular season win, but this one feels like a nice little confidence boost for the Pacers to me, who have been playing better. And I have to give a faux pas sort of and explain why. I tweeted after the game, the Pacers won, the score, the best players, all that kind of stuff. And then I said, the Pacers have now won 3 of their last 5 games. That's true. The Pacers have won 3 of their last 5 games. But if you're going to say something like that, make it the shortest sample possible. The Pacers have actually won 3 of their last 4 games. They beat the Bulls before the break, and they've now won 2 of 3 after the break. The reason I had 3 of 5 in my head is I was actually thinking before this game and during this Mavs game, the Pacers have been playing better in their last 5 games. 5 games ago, they played the Jazz. Before that, they got smoked in DC by the Wizards. They played the Jazz 5 games ago. They lost that game, but they were in it and competitive. And for so much of their stretch prior to that game, that was a huge step up for them. They got smoked by Washington. They got smoked by Phoenix. They got smoked by Cleveland. They got smoked by Memphis. They got smoked by Milwaukee. You've been watching the games. You get it. They have not been playing well. So, yeah, the Jazz aren't great, but like to be close in a game, given where the Pacers had been leading into that outing, was good. They played well, I thought, right? 117. They finally got their offense rolling. Then they literally beat the Bulls with a 24-point comeback 2 days later to head into the break. They have a really fun and uppity all-star break. Then they play the best team in the NBA at the time, the Celtics, who have now fallen behind the Bucks, by the way. And they go to overtime. They played really good in that game. Fantastic second half. One of the best halves they've played the entire season. And then they go to Orlando and kick the doors off of the Magic. Then they go to Dallas and beat the Mavs. So in my head, I thought, okay, they're playing well for their last 5. They've really been playing well their last 4. The Pacers have figured some stuff out. They needed a feel-gooder, as I call some games like this, and they got to feel gooder because they beat a good team. So let's talk about some of the win stuff that you can assign to this game for the Pacers to kind of talk about their recovery. And look, I get a lot of comments about this. You're ignoring that Haliburton got hurt. Yeah, I kind of am, right? They played awful for that stretch. They also have played now as many games since he returned that they did when he was out. And still after his return, they were kind of crap for a little bit still, right? They lost to the Lakers. Then they beat the Kings. Then they lost to the Cavs. They lost to the Heat. They lost to the Suns. They lost to the Wizards. They lost to the Jazz, right? They still had a crappy stretch right after he returned. So it's not just on him that a lot of this structure stuff that I'm saying happened, right? But Pacers win. They beat the Mavs. And that is, given the NBA standings right now, their first win over an opponent with an over 500 record in the whole year of 2023. The last time they beat an over 500, a winning record team before that was the Clippers on New Year's Day, or New Year's Eve, of 2022. This year they've beaten the Raptors, who are 1 game under 500, the Blazers, who are a few games under, the Hornets, who are so far under, the Bulls, who are under 500, and the Magic, who are under 500. So this was their best win, just quality-wise, of the year. The Mavs are good. And yes, they're still integrating 2 new pieces and maybe aren't like awesome, but they're really talented. If you watch the game, you saw Luka have 18 points in the first quarter and Kyrie Irving do stuff that very few players can do. They're good. They're still a good team at this time. Pacers were better, right? They got to the line 40 times. They haven't done that all season. It doesn't matter that they're playing a bad team. They've played a team in bad form. They've put other teams in bad form and not gotten 40 free throws, right? Tyrese Haliburton hasn't scored over 30 points, even against other teams with poor defenses, right? They played well. They deserved to beat the Mavs regardless of the timing of the Mavs being on the calendar. They got their second win in a row. That's the first time they've done that since the last game before Haliburton's injury, when they beat the Hornets on January 8th. Right before that, they beat the Blazers on January 6th. Haliburton gets hurt against the Knicks 3 days later. They had not won 2 games in a row since Halliburton went down. They did this time. They beat the Magic handily, and they beat the Mavs. And I talked about this after the Magic game, but that was their first road win of 2023, their first road win since before Christmas, right? Now they've gotten 2 in a row. That kind of shows the quality they're playing at. Because, yes, again, the Magic and the Mavs, not amazing, but they've played other not awesome teams on the road in this stretch and not won. They lost in Orlando earlier in this exact stretch. They lost to the Suns before the trade and before they were healthy. The Suns are better now, but still, they lost to the Thunder on the, I could go on and on. The Wizards aren't great, right? They lost those games on the road. They beat 2 good teams on the road right now, right? A lot of stuff going well for the Pacers. 3 out of 4. They've beaten some bad teams, sure, but they actually got the wins, and they got some feel-good wins, and that's what this team needed. An on-the-road win, starting a winning streak, doing stuff they haven't done for the first time of the year in the win column, and starting to look like the team that they were earlier in the season. I think the results reflect that, right? They're running in transition a little more. They have a spirited, let's kick your butt offensive identity. Those are the kind of things that even when Halliburton returned and they were kind of rolling him back in, we're kind of lost, right? And I get that. When you lose a lot, you can be a defeated team. Spirits can be low. I understand that. I'm not calling them out or blaming them for this sort of thing at all. You hope a team rises above it all the time, but I get it. But they had some good, feel-good kind of performances with Utah and Chicago. They had a really good, feel-good performance against the Celtics, and I talked about that in the podcast after that game. They said it. Myles Turner said it. TJ McConnell said it. There are no moral victories. We get that. But this is as close as it gets, right? Losing an OT to the best team in the league, that's a good performance given how we've been playing. And they have built off that in a great way. They have not lost in regulation in any of their last 4 games, if you want to be Mr. Technicality, because of how well they played against Boston. And then they've built on that by kicking the Magic's butt, having an excellent offensive outing, and beating the Mavs in Dallas. And the Pacers look more like the team that they were earlier in the season. Does that mean they're going to keep it rolling? I don't know. This team's been up and down for a lot of the year. They don't have a lot of long win streaks either, despite not having a ton of losing streaks until Halliburton got hurt. But their schedule coming up, pretty easy. Spurs Thursday, who are before tonight, lost 16 games in a row. Bulls Sunday. Pacers have beaten them twice within the last month. 76ers the day after. That's tough. Then it's Rockets, Pistons, and then 3 games later, the Hornets. If the Pacers continue to play well, they could win several of those games. They could get through their Hornets game with only 3 losses in their next 9 games, and all of a sudden, they're 34-37 and right back in the thick of things. But they've got to keep playing the way that these last 2 games have indicated, and the way that this game specifically suggests that they can if they continue to play their best. But I think this win showed, through all the things I just detailed about how they haven't won 2 in a row, or haven't won on the road, or haven't beaten a good team in forever, that they are playing better right now. And they have an easy schedule coming up. That timing could be very good for them as a team that, they talked about it. The plan's appealing. It's right there. It's right in front of them, and they're close to it. Playing well right now. Certainly good for the Pacers, and part of why I messed up and said 3 out of 5 when really it's 3 out of 4. And it wasn't just a good night for the Pacers in the standings because they won. Although them winning is obviously very important, obviously, for any pursuit that they actually want. The Bulls also lost. The Bulls lost to the Raptors. I mean, the Raptors are another play-in team, but Pacers are chasing the Bulls and Wizards for that 10th spot. Any loss by the Bulls, Wizards, or Raptors when they don't play each other is good for the Pacers, and the Bulls lost. The Pacers are now 1 game behind Chicago for that 11th spot. Sunday's game could end up being pretty big for the Pacers in the standings push. If they can beat the Bulls then, it'd be helpful for tiebreaker. It'd be helpful for standings. All sorts of things that could end up mattering depending on how the rest of the season goes. Also, the Spurs one, I mentioned that earlier when telling you to listen to Locked On Spurs. That's also huge because they were getting close to the Rockets in the standings at the bottom, and the Pacers went the Rockets to finish with one of the worst 2 records. Every Spurs win, Pacers love that because it helps them in the inverse standings when the season comes to an end. Come draft time, Spurs won, Bulls lost, Pacers won. They'll be happy with how this night turned out for them. And speaking of the Spurs, tomorrow we'll be talking a lot of Spurs. We haven't had a Spurs guest on all season. So for the first segment, we'll talk about tiebreakers, right? What you need to know about where the Pacers sit with the Wizards, the Raptors, the Bulls, the Magic, all the teams that they could reasonably catch this season, and what the important games will be for them to potentially win those tiebreakers if they would like to make the plan. Before Noah Magaro-George will join us, and we'll talk about the Spurs and team building like we do when the Pacers play a team for the first time of the season, although they've already played the Spurs, but it was the second game. It wasn't worth previewing what the Spurs are like at that time. It'll be fun. We'll get to a lot about the Spurs and all sorts of fun stuff on tomorrow's show. And Friday, we'll talk about that game and all sorts of other fun topics. You won't want to miss it. And if something happens in the buyout market, of course, we'll dive into that instead of the stuff I just said. Thank you guys so much for listening today. Have a fantastic day. We will see you tomorrow.